The government and this House must ensure that every tax dollar is properly spent. The government must respond in full to my queries, or Singaporeans can take it that taxpayers' money has been wasted.
What he does today is to pull certain figures from public sources and then start to build on them this giant edifice of figures which one has no idea how he arrived at these conclusions. Then, in a giant leap of illogic, he then attempts to link the Sports Hub and the SPH Media Trust matters to a completely unrelated issue, GST, and now also to Comcare. You have to wonder why he does this.
The first significant outlay of taxpayers' money is the government's provision of up to $900 million to fund the media operations of SPH Media Trust over the next 5 years. I believe the deal to restructure Singapore Press Holding Limited, or SPH, that the government has approved is questionable. Only $110 million of cash and shares were left behind to fund the loss-making media business, and taxpayers will be footing the rest of the bill moving forward. It makes no business sense for the government to have agreed to this proposal. The second significant expense incurred by taxpayers is the $1.5 billion contract termination cost to be paid to Sports Hub Private Limited, or SHPL, which is said to comprise $300 million for the open market value of the Sports Hub and $1.2 billion for taking over the outstanding loans taken up by SHPL for the construction of the Sports Hub. I support the government's takeover of the Sports Hub, and I'm fully aware of the developmental and financial benefits. However, I believe that the government has been overly generous in estimating the fair open market value and the remaining financial liabilities of the Sports Hub. They cost taxpayers $2.4 billion. This may be small relative to the national reserves and the $130 billion annual revenues at the disposal of the government. But $2.4 billion can go a long way in helping Singaporeans who are struggling financially. For example, it is enough to exempt average Singaporeans from 2 years of additional 2% of GST, or to fund 10 years of Comcare cash payouts for the poor Singaporeans. We could also apply the $2.4 billion to help young Singaporeans experiencing great difficulties to buy a HDB flat now, or reducing inflation pressure on all Singaporeans earlier.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the thrust of Mr. Leong's speech is that the government is not fiscally prudent and public expenditure is not well managed. He makes various allegations about the Sports Hub and SPH Media Trust in purported support of these allegations. He says that he requires the government to answer in full. Sir, these assertions are without basis. The government has already responded in full many times. Minister Edwin has already explained why we chose the PPP approach for this project and how we benefited from it. Unfortunately, Mr. Leong has chosen to ignore these detailed explanations and instead makes a completely baseless and false claim that the termination sum can be lower. Likewise, for SPH Media Trust, or SMT. This was addressed by Minister Iswaran as the reasons why it was necessary to do this in his ministerial statement on 10th May 2021. Government support will allow SMT to make long-term investments in capability development in the areas of technology and talent. This is needed to sustain and develop our local news media and ensure that we have a trusted, credible source of news and information for Singaporeans. It's also necessary in order to support our vernacular print media, the Malay, Chinese and Tamil press, which play a crucial role in preserving our mother tongues and cultural inheritance. Mr. Leong fails to recognize the realities facing the media industry in the real world, and that if we were to do as he suggests, it will leave SPH Media on a trajectory of decline and eventually result in a Singapore without a viable English language domestic media and without our Chinese, Malay and Tamil media, which is not in our national interest. But as he constantly reminds us and reminded us again today, he has 30 years experience in business and financial management, so he shouldn't have any difficulty understanding them. So if objectively the rationale, the figures are laid out, and if he does understand them, then there's only one other conclusion, which is that this can only be a deliberate and cynical attempt to stoke anxiety and disquiet, confuse Singaporeans, and damage the government. I ask members of this House and Singaporeans not to be taken in, but to reject these bogus allegations and to support the government. Then we can continue to sustain good governance and sound policies for the benefit of all Singaporeans, especially to take care of our elderly and to support the disadvantaged and vulnerable members of our society.